What would you do if everyone around you spoke in engines, but you spoke in whispers? Staff Sergeant Gemma Vaughn crouches beside the Bradley fighting vehicle, her calloused fingers tracing coolant lines like reading Braille in the desert heat. Fort Carson's motor pool stretches endless rows of olive-drab steel, sleeping in formation. The Colorado sun beats down merciless, turning metal into brand irons. She's been here 3 years. 3 years of proving herself one wrench turn at a time. Other mechanics call her Ghost. Not because she's invisible, because she moves through problems others can't even see. While Sergeant Colton Foster barks orders, his voice echoing off hangar walls, Gemma slips under chassis, finds what's broken, fixes what's bleeding. No fanfare. No credit. Just the quiet satisfaction of engines that purr. Her grandfather taught her that. Master Sergeant William Vaughn, Vietnam veteran, Purple Heart recipient, the kind of soldier who fixed helicopters under enemy fire. His toolbox sits locked in her footlocker, 30 pounds of history wrapped in olive canvas. Tools that rebuilt Huey engines in Mekong Delta mud. Wrenches that kept birds flying when lives hung in balance. She's never told anyone about the commendations tucked beneath those tools. The medals he earned before Agent Orange stole his lungs, stole his voice, stole everything except his love for making broken things whole. This morning feels different. The desert air carries tension like electricity before lightning. Master Sergeant Everett Pierce storms across the bay, his face twisted with frustration. Behind him trails a convoy of officers, their pressed uniforms screaming importance. Colonel Ryder Sinclair, Major Juniper Madison, Captain Liliana Monroe. Names that carry weight in the chain of command. Voices that shape careers with single words. The main battle tank sits silent. Cold. Dead. For 6 hours they've tried everything. Foster and his crew crawling over the M1 Abrams like ants on roadkill. Computer diagnostics flash error codes in angry red sequences. Manual after manual gets consulted, pages flapping in desert wind. Radio calls crackle to specialists stationed hundreds of miles away at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Nothing. The tank that should roar like thunder sits mute as a gravestone. Foster pounds his fist against the turret housing. His face reddens with each failed attempt, each suggestion dismissed, each theory crumbling. Specialist Parker Tate climbs from the driver's compartment, shaking his head. Oil stains his uniform. Defeat stains his expression. Corporal Maisie Wolfe slides from beneath the hull, her wrench slipping from grease-slicked fingers. Colonel Sinclair paces his boots, grinding gravel into powder. Tomorrow's training exercise hangs in the balance. 48 hours until deployment. 48 hours to prove this unit can function in the sandbox of Afghanistan. Without the lead tank, the entire mission crumbles. Without the mission, careers evaporate like morning dew in desert heat. Pierce's voice cuts through morning air. Everyone who thinks they know engines step forward. A dozen hands shoot up. Foster first, then Tate, then Wolfe. They swarm the disabled, giant tools clanging like cowbells, voices rising in competition, each claiming expertise, none finding answers. Gemma stays back. Watches. Listens to the silence beneath their noise. She's learned that broken things whisper their secrets to those who know how to be still. The hydraulic fluid pooled near the tracks tells one story. Dark amber drops, spelling out pressure failures in a language only she seems to read. The electrical burning smell tells another. Ozone and copper mixed with diesel fumes, creating a signature of circuits pushed past limits. The way the engine seized mid-cycle tells a third. Metal grinding against metal in rhythms that speak of timing chains thrown off course by something. Subtle, something overlooked. But no one's listening to the quiet testimony of metal and oiled. They're too busy performing competence for the officers who grow more agitated with each passing hour. Foster kicks the track, swears at the desert sky, announces to everyone and no one that this piece of junk was probably sabotaged. The word hangs heavy in the morning heat. Sabotage. In wartime, that word carries weight like a loaded rifle. Suddenly, every malfunction becomes suspicious. Every failure becomes personal. Every setback becomes evidence of enemies within. Gemma feels the shift in how people look at each other. Trust cracking like paint in desert sun. Suspicion creeping through the ranks like sand through armor. She thinks about her grandfather's toolbox sitting locked in her footlocker. The one he carried through Vietnam. The one that holds secrets she's never shared with anyone here. The Purple Heart citation folded beneath socket wrenches. The photographs of helicopters rebuilt under monsoon rains. The letter of commendation. From a general whose name still appears on buildings at the Pentagon. But not today. Today she remains what she's always been. The quiet woman who fixes things others break. The quiet woman who knows the answer but hasn't been asked the right question. The morning stretches on. Officers multiply like bureaucratic bacteria. Pressure builds in desert heat. The tank stays silent as a sphinx, and Gemma Vaughn's Staff Sergeant Ghost keeps her distance, keeps her tools clean, keeps her grandfather's legacy locked away where no one can see what she's really capable of. What would you do if you held the answer, but nobody asked the right question? What would you do if your silence was the only thing standing between you and their judgment? The sun climbs higher, casting shorter shadows across the motor pool. Sweat beads on foreheads, drips on a hot metal, evaporates instantly. Other units gather, drawn by the commotion. Word spreads through the base like wildfire through dry brush. The tank that won't start. The mission in jeopardy. The brass getting nervous. Gemma watches from her workstation, pretending to inventory tools while her eyes track every failed attempt, every frustrated gesture, every moment of growing desperation. She knows what they're missing. Has known since. The first diagnostic code flashed red. The problem isn't mechanical. It's electrical. A cascade failure in the fire control system triggered by a loose connection in the turret ring assembly. Simple fix. 15 minutes. Maybe 20 if you account for the heat. But they're looking in all the wrong places. Chasing symptoms instead of causes. Fighting the disease instead of finding the infection. Foster climbs down from the commander's hatch's uniform, soaked with sweat and frustration. His radio crackles with increasingly urgent demands for updates. Pierce stalks between the disabled tank and his office trailer, where phones ring with calls from higher up the chain. Questions that demand answers he doesn't have. Solutions that require expertise that seems to have vanished like smoke in wind. The mechanics work harder. Voices rise higher. Tools clatter faster. But the tank remains stubbornly silent. Gemma thinks about her grandfather lying in that VA hospital bed, telling her stories about the helicopters he kept flying when everyone said they were too damaged to ever lift off again. How he'd listen to engines breathe, feel their heartbeat through metal skin, understand their pain like a doctor. Reading symptoms. The gift he passed down wrapped in worn leather tool. Roles and wisdom from a war that taught him machines have souls if you know how to hear them. The tank's soul is crying out. But nobody's listening. What would you do if you held the answer, but nobody asked the right question? What would you do if your silence was the only thing standing between you and their judgment? Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. By noon, the desert heat turns the motor pool into a furnace. More officers arrive. Black sedans kicking up dust clouds that settle on everything like judgment. Brigadier General Patricia Hawthorne steps from the lead vehicle, her stars catching sunlight like warning signals. Pierce snaps to attention, his spine rigid as rebar. The kind of posture that screams desperation wrapped in military bearing. The general's eyes sweep the scene with laser precision. Disabled tank. Frustrated mechanics. Mission clock ticking down like a bomb timer. Her voice cuts through heat haze. Sharp as broken glass. What's the status, Master Sergeant? Pierce swallows hard. His words stumble over each other like soldiers retreating under enemy fire. 6 hours, ma'am. Multiple diagnostic attempts. Computer systems showing cascade failures, but we can't isolate the primary malfunction. The general's silence weighs more than words. She walks around the tank, her boots clicking against concrete with metronomic precision. Foster intercepts her path, his chest puffed out like a rooster claiming territory. Ma'am. With respect, this unit has seen better days. Equipment this old breaks down without warning. Sometimes there's nothing anyone can do. The general stops, turns toward Foster with the kind of look that ends careers. Are you telling me, Sergeant, that the United States Army deploys equipment to combat zones knowing it might fail our soldiers when they need it most? Foster's face drains of color and confidence. His mouth opens, closes, opens again like a fish drowning in AI. No, ma'am. That's not what I meant. We just need more time. Maybe some specialists from Aberdeen. Or replacement parts from depot-level maintenance. More time. The phrase hangs between them like a noose. General Hawthorne checks her watch. The gesture small, but loaded with meaning. 36 hours until this unit ships overseas. 36. Hours to prove you can maintain the equipment that keeps our people alive. She turns to Pierce. Her voice drops to conversational level, which somehow makes it more terrifying. Master Sergeant, I need this tank operational by 0600 tomorrow. Find someone who can make that happen. The general climbs back into her sedan. Dust swirls as the convoy disappears, leaving behind a silence heavier than lead. Pierce looks around the motor pool like a drowning man searching for driftwood. His eyes pass over Gemma twice before settling on the group of mechanics still clustered around the disabled tank. Foster wipes sweat from his forehead, leaves a streak of grease and desperation. Parker kicks at loose gravel, his confidence cracked like old paint. Maisie Wolf stares at the tank as if willing it to reveal its secrets through pure frustration. The afternoon stretches endless. As Desert Highway, new theories emerge, get tested, get discarded. Maybe it's the transmission. Maybe it's the fuel system. Maybe it's computer virus. Maybe it's sabotage. Each may be another nail in the coffin of certainty. Gemma continues her inventory work, organizing tools, checking supplies, pretending not to notice the growing desperation that fills the air like smoke. But she notices everything. How Foster's hands shake when he thinks nobody's watching. How Pierce checks his phone, obsessively waiting for salvation that won't come through cellular signals. How the other mechanics start avoiding eye contact with each other, and the broken tank that judges them with silent accusation. She thinks about her grandfather's stories. How he'd work alone in Vietnamese jungles while artillery shells screamed overhead and helicopter rotors beat rhythms of life and death. How he'd strip engines down to bare components, rebuild them from memory and instinct when manuals turned to pulp in monsoon rains. How he never needed an audience or recognition, just the knowledge that somewhere American boys would make it home because his hands knew their trade. The toolbox in her footlocker calls to her, whispers promises of solutions and silence. But she's learned the hard way that offering help when you're not asked marks you as arrogant, presumptuous, uppity. Better to wait, better to watch, better to let them exhaust their options before stepping forward with grandfather's tools and grandmother's patience. The sun begins its descent toward western mountains. Shadows grow longer. Frustration grows deeper. Hope grows thinner than desert air. Foster throws his wrench against the concrete. Metal rings like a bell tolling failure. This is impossible, he shouts to no one and everyone. 6 mechanics, 12 hours, every tool in the inventory, and we're no closer than when we started. Pierce appears beside the tank, his face grim as cemetery stones. Keep working, he orders. All night, if necessary. That general meant what she said. Careers are on the line. Lives are on the line. Everything that matters balanced on the edge of one silent engine. And Gemma Vaughn, Staff Sergeant, Ghost Keeper of Secrets, Guardian of Grandfather's Legacy, continues her inventory, continues her waiting, continues her silence. What would you do if you watched good people destroy themselves trying to solve a puzzle you could finish in 15 minutes? Part 3 of 4. The Crucible. Midnight brings no relief from desert heat or mounting pressure. Floodlights turn the motor pool into a stage where desperation performs for an audience of shadows and stars. Foster hasn't slept. His eyes red-rimmed like roadmaps to nowhere good. Coffee stains mark his uniform like badges of failure. Pierce paces between the tank and his office phone, pressed to ear, explaining to colonels what he can't explain to himself. The mechanics work in shifts now. Tag teams of exhaustion, wrestling with metal that refuses to surrender its secrets. Gemma watches from her corner, organizing the same tools for the third time. Her presence barely noticed by men consumed with their own importance that she's used to. Being invisible. 3 years of proving that quiet competence means less than loud confidence in the military's pecking order. But tonight, invisibility feels like armor. Foster stumbles past her workstation, muttering obscenities at the tank, at the army, at God himself for creating machines that break at the worst possible moments. He doesn't see Gemma's grandfather's photo tucked inside her toolbox lid. Master Sergeant William Vaughn standing beside a Huey helicopter in Vietnamese jungle, tools in one hand, Purple Heart citation in the other. The photo her grandfather never displayed. The recognition he never talked about. The heroism he wrapped in humility and passed down through calloused hands and whispered wisdom. Dawn creeps across Colorado plains like reluctant testimony. 24 hours until deployment. 24 hours until careers either launch or crash like helicopters without maintenance. General Hawthorne's sedan appears again black, paint reflecting sunrise like Judgment Day. She steps out, surveys the scene with eyes that miss nothing and forgive less. The disabled tank still silent. The mechanics still frustrated. The mission still hanging by threads thinner than spider silk. Pierce snaps to attention despite running on caffeine and desperation. His salute sharp, but his confidence dulled by failure. Status report, Master Sergeant. Pierce's voice cracks like adolescent thunder. Ma'am, we've isolated several potential causes, but haven't achieved operational status. We're pursuing multiple avenues of investigation. Military speak for failure dressed in uniform. The general's silence stretches like desert highway toward uncomfortable horizons. She walks to the tank, places her hand on cold metal as if taking its pulse through armor plating. How many mechanics have worked on this? Pierce counts on tired fingers. 12, ma'am. Plus consultations with Aberdeen specialists and depot maintenance. Technical advisors. 12 experts. 24 hours. One silent engine. The math of military failure written in grease stains and broken pride. General Hawthorne's eyes sweep the motor pool. Past Foster sweating bullets despite morning cool. Past Tate and Wolf avoiding eye contact like guilty children. Past Pierce standing at attention while his career crumbles around him. Her gaze settles on Gemma, the quiet woman organizing tools in the corner. The ghost who moves through problems others create. Who is that? Pierce follows the general's stare. Blinks twice as if seeing Gemma for the first time despite 3 years of shared deployment preparation. Staff Sergeant Vaughn, ma'am. Vehicle maintenance specialist. Has she worked on this tank? Pierce hesitates. The pause pregnant with implications he doesn't understand, but instinctively fears. No, ma'am. We have our most experienced mechanics handling primary diagnostics. The general nods. Her expression unreadable as classified documents. She walks toward Gemma, boots clicking, concrete countdown to conversation. Sergeant Vaughn. Gemma looks up from her tools. Not startled. Not nervous. Just present in the way that comes from years of watching without being seen. Ma'am, what's your assessment of this situation? The question hangs in morning air like incense waiting for prayer. Every eye in the motor pool turns toward them. Foster's mouth opens in protest, then closes when he realizes protest might sound like admission of incompetence. Gemma glances at the disabled tank. At the mechanics clustered around it like mourners at a funeral. At Pierce, whose career hangs in balance. Ma'am, I haven't been asked to assess the situation. The general's smile could cut glass. I'm asking now. The words simple as sunrise, complicated as military hierarchy built on respect earned through volume. An aggression rather than competence, and quiet. Gemma stands. Brushes dust from her uniform. Her grandfather's tools calling to her across decades and deployments. His voice whispering through desert wind. Sometimes fixing things requires breaking the silence that keeps them broken. What would you say if a general asked your opinion and you knew the answer everyone else had missed? Gemma walks toward the disabled tank. Each step echoing across concrete like hammer strikes on anvils of assumption. The motor pool falls silent. Even the desert wind holds its breath, waiting for what might unfold. Foster moves to intercept his face, flushed with territorial instinct and wounded pride. Ma'am. With respect, Sergeant Vaughn hasn't been briefed on the diagnostic protocols we've implemented. She might contaminate our systematic approach. Could compromise the integrity of our investigation. The general's stare could freeze gasoline in summer heat. Step aside, Sergeant. Foster retreats like smoke before hurricane wind. His certainty crumbling like sand castles against incoming tide. Gemma circles the tank, her eyes reading what others missed. Not the obvious wounds, but the subtle symptoms of systems crying for attention in languages only she speaks fluently. She kneels beside the turret assembly. Places her ear against metal, listening. For heartbeats only she can hear. The hydraulic lines whisper pressure loss in rhythms that spell out component failure. The electrical housing hums with overload, singing songs of circuits pushed past limits. The fire control system broadcasts distress in frequencies beyond normal hearing, but familiar as childhood lullabies to hands trained by Vietnam veteran who understood that machines have souls that speak to those who listen. She stands, brushes dust from her knees, faces the general with calm that comes from inherited certainty. Ma'am, it's a cascade failure in the fire control system, triggered by loose connections in the turret ring assembly. The computer diagnostics are chasing symptoms, not causes. Like treating fever without finding infection, Foster laughs. The sound bitter as desert alkali mixed with desperation, but that's impossible. We checked the fire control system first thing. Ran full diagnostics twice. Brought in specialists from 3 different technical teams. If there was something that basic, we would have found it hours ago. His voice carries the weight of expertise built on manuals and classroom training, but missing the intuition that comes from grandfather's hands and inherited wisdom. Gemma doesn't argue, doesn't defend, doesn't waste breath on explanations that fall on ears trained to hear volume over wisdom. Simply returns to her corner, retrieves her grandfather's toolbox. The olive canvas worn smooth by decades of service across 2 wars and countless emergencies. Where failure meant death and success meant another day of keeping American boys alive. She opens the kit with reverence reserved for sacred relics. Socket wrenches gleam like silver prayers answered through calloused hands. Multimeters wait like electronic confessionals ready to reveal secrets hidden in copper and silicon. Wire strippers sharp as surgeons' scalpels precise enough to save lives through millimeter adjustments. Foster's voice rises with panic and pride. Wounded and bleeding, ma'am, we can't have unauthorized personnel tampering with critical systems. There are protocols, procedures, chain of responsibility. If something goes wrong, if she damages something vital, the liability issues alone could. The general silences him with raised hand. Her patience wearing thin as high-altitude air. Sergeant Vaughn, show me. Gemma approaches the tank again, this time with tools that know their purpose like homing pigeons know direction. She removes the access panel from the turret ring with movements economical as haiku. Her fingers trace wiring harnesses like reading scripture written in copper and insulation by engineers who never imagined their work would be interpreted by granddaughter of helicopter mechanic who learned diagnosis through artillery fire and monsoon rain. There. A connection loose as campaign promises. Hidden beneath cable management that looked secure to casual inspection but sang discord to ears trained to hear mechanical truth. She tightens the fitting with movements precise as prayer. Checks voltage with her grandfather's multimeter that survived Tet offensive and decades of faithful service. Clears error codes with keystrokes that flow like water finding level. The tank's engine coughs once, twice, then rumbles to life with mechanical thunder that shakes concrete and assumptions. Equally, systems indicators flash green like Christmas morning after long winter of disappointment. Hydraulic pressure stabilizes. Electrical systems, per contentment. Fire control comes online with digital certainty that speaks of problems solved and missions saved. Foster stares mouth agape, as if witnessing resurrection performed by the ghost he'd forgotten existed. His expertise crumbling like ancient parchment exposed to sunlight. Pierce checks his watch. Checks again. 15 minutes. From diagnosis to operational status in less time than it takes to drink coffee and explain why something can't be done. The general nods. Her approval subtle as sunrise but warm as desert noon, heating metal and melting assumptions about competence and quiet authority. Outstanding work, Sergeant Vaughn. She turns to Pierce. Her voice carrying command, authority, and quiet suggestion. That sounds like recommendation but feels like order. Master Sergeant, I recommend Staff Sergeant Vaughn receive appropriate recognition for this achievement. The kind of recognition that builds careers on foundation of actual competence. Pierce snaps to attention. His relief visible as sweat stains on desert uniforms. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, ma'am. I'll submit the paperwork this afternoon. The general climbs back into her sedan. Before closing the door, she looks once more at Gemma. Her eyes holding knowledge that seems impossible. Soldier, your grandfather would be proud. The words hit Gemma like friendly fire. How did she know? How could she see the legacy carried in calloused hands and quiet competence? What connection bridged decades between Vietnam helicopter and Colorado tank? The sedan disappears in dust clouds that settle slowly on transformed landscape where assumptions lie buried beneath proof of inherited wisdom. The tank idles content as cat in sunbeam. Mission saved. Careers rescued. Deployment back on schedule. Soldiers who'll never know her name protected by her grandfather's tools and her quiet hands. Foster approaches Gemma's workstation. His earlier confidence replaced by something resembling humility mixed with bewilderment. How did you know? We ran every diagnostic in the manual. followed every protocol, consulted every expert we could reach. Gemma closes her grandfather's toolbox, the tools returning to patient darkness like secrets waiting to be needed again. Sometimes the loudest problems have quiet solutions. Sometimes you have to listen to what machines aren't saying. Sometimes the answer whispers while everyone else shouts. She walks toward the barracks. Her work finished. Her silence restored. Her grandfather's legacy proven once again in the language of fixed things and saved missions. Behind her the tank purrs like mechanical prayer, a sound that speaks of problems solved by quiet hands and inherited wisdom passed down through generations of people who fix more than they break. Foster watches her go. Pierce watches her go. The other mechanics watch her go, each seeing for the first time what had been there all along. Staff Sergeant Ghost fading back into invisibility, carrying tools and secrets that fix more than engines. That night, Pierce submits paperwork for commendation. The kind of recognition that builds careers on foundation of competence rather than volume. Service rather than self-promotion. Results rather than rhetoric. But Gemma sleeps peacefully knowing her grandfather's tools still work their quiet magic. In hands that learn to listen before speaking. To fix before claiming credit. To serve without seeking applause. The tank sleeps too. Ready for deployment. Ready to protect soldiers who'll never know that their safety depends on the quiet woman who speaks in whispers but works in thunder. What would you do if you discovered that the quietest person in the room held all the answers you've been searching for? Sometimes the most powerful voices never raise themselves above a whisper. Sometimes true strength lives in silence until the moment silence becomes betrayal of duty. Sometimes the ghost in the machine is actually the angel who keeps it running. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe.